This is Bloomberg Crypto, a daily Bloomberg iHeart podcast. And I'm Stacey Marie Ishmael, managing editor of crypto for Bloomberg News. It's Wednesday, September 21st. This crypto winter is still blowing cold, and it's not clear when, or even if, a so-called spring will arrive and stick around.
It's also evident that crypto has been hit very hard.
Now, another bad week for Bitcoin. The cryptocurrency has continued to slump, and it could be a precursor of more pain to come, according to some strategists watching the sell-off.
And it's a really interesting gauge because when you put it alongside the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index, you can see that kind of symmetry in the way they've moved. Where do we go from here?
These losses have affected the entire crypto ecosystem, from hedge funds to lenders to countless individual crypto investors. By most calculations, $2 trillion worth of value, that's trillion with a T, has been wiped off of this market. It's estimated that before the winter, the total market value of crypto assets worldwide stood around $3 trillion. That's a sizable chunk. But how is this figure, market value, calculated? And how representative, if at all, is it of crypto's actual economic value? On today's show, I'll talk to Bloomberg reporter Vildana Hajric.
If you were going by the market cap figure, it was $3 trillion back in the fall of 2021.
About this increasingly disputed metric. Vildana, you've been writing, along with all the other markets that you cover, a little bit about crypto, and specifically around the ways in which people try to assess crypto's value.
Yeah, this is an interesting rabbit hole that we went very deep into, thanks to one of my editors at Bloomberg Business Week who had been thinking, he loves to think about these big, grand meta ideas, and he had been wondering about cryptocurrency market cap, because it's something that we quote so very frequently. Mm-hmm. So if you remember back last year when crypto prices were at or hovering around their all-time highs, what a lot of people were saying at the time is that the crypto market value was around $3 trillion. However, we wanted to know if that actually was a very good representation for, what the crypto market is actually worth. And if you think about what market cap is just the number of coins that are out there multiplied by the last price.
But there's a lot of coins.
There's
a lot of prices.
And there's a lot of very fraudulent projects out there and lots of coins that maybe have gone so-called dormant, where they haven't moved or haven't been used in 5 or more years sometimes. And so do you want to be including that in your calculation or not? There were a lot of little factors at play. And so we really wanted to see, okay, is it 3 trillion? And if it's not 3 trillion, what might it be?
So what is it?
Well, the first thing I did was I wanted to get a sense of how many people actually use cryptocurrencies. I looked at the US because it's very, very difficult to get global data for something like this. But there were actually 2 very useful surveys out. One was from the Fed that said something like 12% of US adults use or interact or trade cryptocurrencies. And another by Pew said 16%. And so that's something like 53 million people, which really isn't insignificant. Mm-hmm. And so that was the very first step I took, just in trying to figure out, okay, how many people actually were interacting or knowing about crypto, especially in the US, especially at the highs last year.
And from there, where did the rabbit hole take you?
Then I talked to a crypto skeptic, and I knew he was a crypto skeptic. It was David Gerard. He tweets a lot about crypto. He has his own blog, and he writes a lot about crypto. And I just wanted to pose to him the question, is market cap actually a good way of measuring crypto market value? And immediately he said no. He used a curse word, which we won't repeat, but he said it's basically just all made up numbers. And he cited some of the things we were just talking about, including that there's just a lot of projects out there or coins that are floating around out there that you might not want to be including in your calculation.
What did he suggest instead?
He actually suggested that I look at flows into and out of exchanges, which is very difficult to do because the exchanges have to share information.
We know
with
exchanges love to share information with journalists.
Yeah, they love it. So basically, after he told me that, I called a bunch of other researchers, some actually at the Cleveland Fed, and one of them was like, "No, this will be impossible." So it was not a good start at first. Just finding out that crypto market cap maybe is not a good way to be measuring the market, and then also to just sort of hit this dead end. But I continued talking to people.
So before we go into the ways in which you avoided the dead end, are there folks out there, because like skeptic's going to skeptic and booster's going to boost. So who are the folks in the middle who are like, well, here are other ways, not just data from exchanges. What were some of the other ways that folks might have suggested made sense in this assessment that you were trying to do?
So this is why I wanted to talk specifically with crypto researchers, or even there's crypto economists. So I wanted to talk to companies that I knew sift through data or track data really well. I talked to somebody at Genesis, and she had told me to look at something called free float, which is the number of coins in circulation, but you actually subtract out like foundations and nonprofit groups. And that sort of gives you, she said market cap actually isn't such a bad way of looking at things because it helps you account for speculation and speculative froth. Mm-hmm. But that reading, this free float reading, gave us a reading of 787 billion. So very different from
3 trillion.
3 trillion.
And I mean, of course, at the time that you started doing this to when, the story published, the market itself by that market cap value declined a lot because the prices were falling.
It's also evident that crypto has been hit very hard. Since its peak in November, it has lost 40% of its value, wiping out more than $570 billion.
Overall, the crypto market has lost nearly $2 trillion in market value since last November.
So were you comparing the sort of closer to 1 trillion value to that, just under 800 billion? Like what were the apples and apples comparisons?
The market did decline quite a bit from those highs that we reached back in November. So if you were going by the market cap figure, it was 3 trillion back in the fall of 2021, much closer to 1 trillion now. So we were really trying to compare to numbers that you would have seen at the peak.
That number, that free float number, was actually compared to that 3 trillion. So it was like this was the free float at the time when Bitcoin was hitting 65K.
Yeah, and for the most part, because I ended up talking to a bunch of other people who then gave me other readings to look at, they also were giving me numbers of their specific readings for the peak back in 2021 and maybe what those numbers look like now. And actually, some of these readings, the free float and some of these other ones that I'm sure we'll go into next, they all were hovering around 800 billion or so. And so the readings themselves, the free float or realized value is another one that I looked at. They don't fall as dramatically as prices or the market cap figure because they're already discounting the froth or the speculation.
Interesting. So just to recap what you're saying, there's this kind of big headline number that a lot of folks, including us here at Bloomberg, have paid attention to, which is, at Bitcoin's peak, at crypto's peak, you're looking at a $3 trillion market. What you're saying is that various other metrics are somewhere closer to an 800 billion-ish number in that same period when everything was, maximum froth, as it were. What explains the difference between those metrics and that 3 trillion? Is it mostly that speculative activity, or are there other factors involved?
I think for the most part, we were just trying to account for the speculative activity or the froth or the number of loans or the leverage that was out in the system. So the realized value figure, that's another one we looked at. That one actually came up the most out of all the people I spoke with. It just kept coming back again and again.
Vildana, what is the realized value?
Okay, so realized value, it's the prices the coins actually fetch in their most recent transaction versus market value, which is the sum of the value of stuff that's out there. And so I suppose it's just a better way to be thinking about, okay, what price a coin might fetch, so to say.
So it's the last bid.
Exactly.
Effectively.
Exactly. For realized value, I spoke with somebody at Glassnode, and Glassnode is pretty well known in the crypto community because they track so much data, and this ratio that they have is called MVRV. It's market value versus realized value. That ratio in November of 2021, at the peak of crypto prices, hit 3.2.
Which means that the market value was 3 times the realized value.
Exactly. So you take the 3 trillion, you divide it by 3.2, and you get a reading around 875. Obviously, these numbers are going to vary, but you get a reading around 870, 880 billion. And that number also just doesn't change as much as the market cap figure would, where you're including all the price declines for the different coins.
I want to make a quick note when we talk about market cap, because I have had some OG markets editors and also, people on the internet point out that capitalization is a concept that historically really works best when you're talking about companies with, shares and like floats, and is a little bit less robust when analogized to something like token prices. Do you think it's like a big deal? I mean, when folks get, we're in an industry in which there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of nomenclature, there's a lot of obsession about this is the one true metric. Is there really a one true metric or one true way of describing everything that's happening, or do folks need to just get comfortable with nuance?
I think we were trying to break the idea that there is this one true metric, because the market cap figure really is something that you just kept seeing over and over. I remember making news when the overall crypto market cap reached 2 trillion, well, first 1 trillion, then 2 trillion, and then neared 3 trillion at the end of last year. And so I think we really wanted to just dispel the notion that you should just be using this one measure, when really there's a couple of, as we point out in the story, different ways to try to show the so-called true value of crypto.
We'll be right back with more from Vildana about the methodology for calculating crypto market value. Even if crypto does have a ton of potential, what are those folks, the most optimistic among them? Like, what are they expecting it to get to?
That, I think, depends largely on how the market is moving. So last year, in 2021, and also in 2022, when prices were skyrocketing, you had a lot of price targets, for Bitcoin in particular, that were ginormous. I think that's
$100,000.
the best, or higher. I think there were some that were 250,000. So when prices are rising and you have people just really excited and they're in this mindset of, okay, things are just going to continue. Like, look at what we've done over the last 2 years alone. It's going to continue going this way. I think that's when you have people obviously most bullish and they're expecting the market to just grow and grow and grow. It's very different this year. Prices aren't doing as well. So people have been sort of
more restrained.
You don't really hear so many price targets, or you don't hear about you don't have as many people coming out with notes or research saying, okay, this is a good price target for Bitcoin to reach. But it's hard. I think a lot of people make the comparison to the gold market, where gold has been around for, I don't even know how long, forever, maybe. And that market, crypto is sometimes thought of as
digital gold.
Digital gold, yes, exactly. So you're having these comparisons between the two, where you have people saying, okay, it might overtake that market at some point. But really, I think it just depends on how the market ebbs and wanes.
Which is, to your earlier point, kind of the challenge with a metric like market value, right? In that so much sentiment is wrapped up in what that number is and what it means to people. There's a phrase that various folks, including sometimes reporters, like to use about, like, well, what's an objective measure? As if there is some sort of magic number that is removed from any kind of prejudice or bias that exists. But it does sound to me like what you're saying is there is fairly broad spread consensus, at least among certain types of academics, researchers, etc., that this idea of realized value is a helpful, if folks wanted to get really attached to an indicator, that's the one they would recommend.
Yeah, it really did keep coming up again and again. I talked to a researcher at UBS. I talked to Glassnode. I talked to Chainalysis, which is this sort of like forensic crypto company. And all of these companies, they're tracking data. They're looking at all these different charts. So the people I spoke with, they all kept bringing up realized value. You do hear it a lot in the crypto space. You do hear about this measure. It's not something that's as mainstream as crypto market cap, but I do think that it's a solid way to be looking at things.
I mean, there's a literal website called coinmarketcap.com.
Yes, which is quoted quite a bit, prices right. from it.
And that's often the place that people anchor around. So, if I fire up a web browser right now and I go to there, it's like it's the name. It also says, hey, here's like today's market cap, 24-hour volume, today's cryptocurrency prices by market cap. What would it take for realizedvalue.com?
Should we start it?
No, to kind of be a thing.
Well, I think if you're into crypto and you're a crypto investor and you do have this belief that prices will recover from what's been going on this year and, for eternity, they'll keep going higher and they'll replace the dollar or whatever, or the gold market or whatever else, then I think the idea of being able to say 3 trillion is just much more alluring than saying the realized value is 880 billion. It's obviously a much bigger figure. It grabs people's attention. So maybe realized value won't become a commonplace mainstream thing. Only because I think people will want to use the bigger number, the one that includes all the froth.
The one with the T.
The one with the T, yeah.
Even if it's not yet quadrillion.
Yeah.
And may never be. We'll see.
But I can easily spend it.
On that note, thank you, Vildana. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
You can find more of Vildana's reporting on the Bloomberg terminal on Bloomberg.com or follow her on Twitter. She's at Vildana Hajric. That is VildanaHajric. On the next episode of Bloomberg Crypto, the merge. It's finally over. It's done. It happened. So now we're going to ask, what's next? And you'll hear words like splurge, purge, verge, all things that rhyme with the merge, and that will soon follow. This is Bloomberg Crypto, a daily podcast from Bloomberg and iHeartRadio. For more shows from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Send us your comments, questions, or suggestions for the show to crypto@bloomberg.net, or find us on Twitter, we're @crypto. The supervising producer of Bloomberg Crypto is Vicky Vergolina. Our senior producer is Janet Babin. Our producers are Mohammed Farouk and Sharon Barrero. Our associate producers are Ty Butler and Moses Undum. Desta Wonderad is our engineer. Original music by Leo Sidran. I'm Stacey Marie Ishmael. We'll be back tomorrow.